centuries. You don't know where you land. It's so dark in mythology. Treasures of history to be found. Hear the legends of time. All the handiworks remain. Only the dream away. Orion, Orion,
Doctor Who Season 10 ran from the 30th of December 1972 until the 23rd of June 1973. There were 26 episodes and 5 stories. And the first story is a hell of an important one. The Three Doctors is the 10th anniversary special. Unlike the other specials, it's just a regular story rather than a separate special event. It's 4 parts long and something is threatening the whole of time. The Time Lords, in one of their earlier examples of being completely fucking powerless, enlist the Doctor to save the day. But one Doctor is not quite enough, so we have Pertwee team up with Troughton and Hartnell. Now Hartnell was very ill and couldn't handle as big a part as the others, and so was accidentally trapped in a time eddy.
Ah, there you are. I seem to be stuck up here. Oh, so you're my replacements. A dandy and a clown.
Which resembles sitting up in some scaffolding in a studio. But it is very nice to see the old guy again. As for Troughton, he's amusing, quick-witted and annoying people in authority. It's as if he never left.
Joe, it's all quite simple. I am he, and he is me.
And we are all together, Goo Goo Kichu?
What?
It's a song by the Beatles.
How does it go? Oh, please be quiet.
Unfortunately for the third Doctor, the people in authority includes him. And they have one hell of a rivalry. They kicked off a tradition that's lasted pretty much until now. The Doctors who meet up, not really getting on. With 2 and 3, it was mostly down to Troughton's obsessive ad-libbing. That was really not Pertwee's style. 10 and 11 and Day of the Doctor were pretty unusual because they got on so well. And while I'm thinking about Day of the Doctor...
You. How can you be here?
Oh, so you're my replacements. A dandy and a clown.
The villain is a long-lost Time Lord called Omega, one of the founders of Time Lord civilization. His name still crops up with Time Lord stuff today. For example, in Day of the Doctor, they name-drop the Omega Arsenal. He's basically Romulus to the Roman Empire, or George Washington to the Americans. Someone who created their civilization and has a lot of myths about them. And yes, I know George Washington almost certainly didn't exist. Omega created the Eye of Harmony, the black hole that made TARDIS travel possible. He was thought lost in the black hole, but ended up in an alternate reality of antimatter where he spent the last few millennia getting pissed off with the Time Lords for not rescuing him. He also created some hilarious-looking minions that resembled jelly molds. The Three Doctors is important for all that, and because it ended the third Doctor's exile on Earth, and stuck another nail in the Unit family's coffin. From now on, the Doctor would only be on Earth if he felt like it. All in all, this is the best anniversary story. And that's only in part because of Joe's jacket. Next is Carnival of Monsters. Generally it's considered a classic, but it doesn't quite click with me. Though it's far from terrible. The Doctor and Joe arrive on a ship in the Indian Ocean, but things aren't quite as they seem. Events repeat. A monster appears, and a giant hand steals the TARDIS. They're actually trapped inside an alien entertainment device containing shrunk people, animals and locations. This was directed by Barry Letts, the show's then producer, and it's very well directed. Before becoming producer, he was most famous on the show for being a director. And he's better than most used. This story is 4 episodes long, and it's been argued that it's a metaphor for the show itself. The entertainment device is the television. It contains different characters and monsters and places. The main monsters are called Drashigs, which is an anagram of dish rag, which is a joke about the poor quality of the special effects. The alien showman who owns the entertainment device even dresses weirdly, is camp and has a beautiful companion. Now I have no idea if that's what they're going for, but the theory made the story much more amusing for me. Ian Marter turns up in a supporting role. You'll see him in a few seasons' time when he's a companion to Tom Baker's Doctor. He's, I think, the second actor after Peter Purves who played Stephen to play a supporting role before being recast and becoming a companion. Next is another important story, Frontier in Space. It's 6 episodes long and introduces the Draconians, one of the important and popular alien races from the classic show that's yet to appear in the new. But they have been mentioned a couple of times. More importantly, this sees the departure of the Master until deep in the Tom Baker era. It wasn't intended to be, but Roger Delgado was killed in a car accident after filming the story. Originally, he was supposed to return for Pertwee's final story and sacrifice himself to save the Doctor. It's the far future, and there are rising tensions between Earth and Draconia, and the Master is attempting to escalate them to all-out war. The Draconians were Pertwee's favourite aliens, and they're a bit like Klingons of later Star Trek. They're very honourable, though unlike Klingons, they're not completely obsessed with fighting. They're a bit like space samurai. A copy of a rejected update of the theme music done by Delia Derbyshire accidentally ended up in some copies of the story, and because of that, we get to listen to this. And be amazed that the same woman who made that abomination also made the original classic. The second to last story of the season was Planet of the Daleks. It's 6 parts long and sees the first script by Dalek creator Terry Nation since 1965, and it's pretty much a sequel to the original Dalek story, and it's an interesting idea. As in, what if the Thals didn't react to the Daleks trying to kill them, and the radiation on Skaro trying to kill them, and starvation trying to kill them by turning into a race of David Bowies, but instead became soldiers? The Thal Dalek war has spread beyond the planet Skaro and onto the planet Spyridon. The Daleks are invisible and are gathering their forces, and the Thals are actually fighting back for once. This story is roughly connected to Frontier in Space. You could almost see it as one massive 12-part story. The leader of the Dalek forces is a bit interesting. He's a Dalek Supreme and is a slightly redesigned Dalek from one of the Peter Cushing movies. And from Spyridon we come down to Earth. Literally. The Doctor teams up with UNIT again to head for the terrible wasteland of Wales. Little did they know that about 35 years later they'd be returning. Permanently. Yes, this is the first bit of Who set in Wales, and to mark the occasion we have lots of hilarious accents. An evil generic corp called Global Chemicals has installed a supercomputer to run their operations, and started dumping toxic crap down mine shafts so obviously that UNIT get called in. And then UNIT call the Doctor in.
No, no, no.
But, Doctor, it's exactly your cup of tea. This fellow's bright green, apparently, and dead.
Yep, the thing that kills you also turns you green. It's amazing they didn't just call this the Emerald Fatal thing. This one's most famous for the brilliant giant maggots, one of the more enduring images of 70s classic Who. It's less famous for the terrible green screen and the awful giant fly. The villainous supercomputer, the Boss, has the second best evil voice in the entirety of Who history.
I am the boss. I'm all around you. Exactly. I am the computer.
And I'll get to the first best in a later episode. This is the story where Jo leaves after falling in love with a local professor and eco-warrior called Clifford Jones. Not only does she leave, but she pretty much tells the Doctor that Clifford is basically a younger version of him. Remember, there's subtext that suggests that the Doctor had feelings for Jo. For some reason. And we get the saddest final shots in the show's history as the Doctor silently sinks a glass of wine during the cheer and drives away alone. I'm sorry, fans of New Who, you can keep your tears and your wailing music and your "oh, I love you, oh no, we can't be together" and all that crap. It doesn't have one iota, one quantum of the emotion in those couple of shots. Subtlety exists. Yeah, that bit was unscripted. Probably my favourite part of the whole Pertwee era is him on Metebelis in this story. He grabs a blue crystal, which is important next season, and appeared with Matt Smith and Hyde. The Green Death is a classic. It's got terrible parts, but the good stuff makes up for it. It's 6 episodes long, and I think it's probably the strongest story of the season. Jo later reappeared with the 11th Doctor in an episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Doctor? That's the Doctor.
What doctor? The doctor? My doctor?
Yeah, well, he can change his face.
I know. It came to a baby's.
Boy, imagine it from my point of view. Last time I saw you, Jo Grant, you were what, 21, 22? It's like someone baked you.
And according to the commentary for that episode, there were plans to bring her back again. And after Liz Sladen's death, they even talked about retooling the show with her as the new lead. Now, Pertwee loved the family feeling of the earlier parts of his era, surrounded by the UNIT regulars, his old friend Roger Delgado, and he got on very well with Katie Manning who played Jo. And sadly, the UNIT regulars being used less, Roger Delgado's death and Katie's decision to leave all played their parts in convincing him that he should go too. And he would, at the end of the next season. And that's that for season 10. An important season, but not amazing, I'm afraid. Nothing truly terrible and some definitely good ones, but most of the season is pretty average. See you next time for the introduction of the woman, the myth, the legend, Sarah Jane Smith. The introduction of the Sontarans and the end of the Third Doctor.
Measure the mystery and the sound without taking enough time. So the handiworks remain only a dream away.
Right, force field on. Well, Sergeant, aren't you going to say that it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside? Everybody else does.
It's pretty obvious, isn't it?